Just want to follow up. Yesterday, President Trump said if he does send in the National Guard to Chicago, he said within 1 week we would have no crime, just like in D.C. First of all, what's your reaction to that timeline? And secondly, is the president right that the National Guard has reduced crime in places like D.C., and would that happen here?
Well, again, the city of Chicago is not calling for the occupation of our city, right? It's illegal and it's unconstitutional. What we've seen in Chicago, 32% reduction in homicides, a nearly 40% reduction in shootings and shooting victims. Robberies are down, carjackings are down, violent crime is down. Just like what is happening in cities like Baltimore and Birmingham, Oakland, Los Angeles. Here's a better question. What should President Trump and the federal government do to ensure that the success that we are having continues? That's what we're asking the federal government, to actually invest in our cities. If we actually do that, we'll continue to see the type of positive trends that we're experiencing.
But is he correct that crime has gone down with the National Guard in D.C.? And what do you think about his timeline of no crime in Chicago after a week if the Guard comes here?
Look, crime is my top priority. It's what I think about every single day when I wake up and before I go to bed. We're working in a collective way to drive violence down in Chicago. The reason why we are experiencing the positive trends that we are experiencing right now is because we're doing the things that work. If Trump and the federal government is actually serious about driving violence down in the city of Chicago, why would he withhold over $800 million for violence prevention? Why would he take away Medicaid? Why would he take away SNAP? Why is he defunding public education? Why isn't he building more affordable homes? And so we're going to do the things that are working here, just like what we've committed to doing. And so far, we're obviously moving in the right direction. More work to be done, but that work is certainly working.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
The president cited black women in red hats to back up his threats. That seemed like a reference to the group that often speaks during city council meetings during public comment. What do you think about how that group has apparently drawn the White House's attention and how it's being used as a pretext to crack down here on Chicago?
Look, here's what I'm paying attention to. I'm paying attention to the things that are actually working, right? I'm paying attention to the 31,119 young people that have summer jobs. We're paying attention to the 4,000 affordable homes that we've built, and we're on pace to build 10,000. I'm paying attention to the work that we're doing to provide mental health support services. I'm paying attention to how we're going to actually make sure that working people can thrive in this city. The reason why we're experiencing the positive trends is because we're actually doing the work that works. That's the most important thing to note here. As we continue to invest in communities that have been historically disinvested in, that's how we drive violence down. The federal government has a responsibility to do its part by funding education, funding Medicaid, funding SNAP, supporting our veterans. That's the work that the federal government should do. That's what we're calling for in Chicago and in cities across America.
What do you hear from black Chicagoans, and do you think those people who he apparently cited speak for the community?
Well, look, here's what I do know of someone who lives on the west side of Chicago. We want investment. We want investment. That's why we put forth a $1.25 billion economic development plan. That's investment. It's why we put millions of dollars into providing dignity for those who are without homes. It's why we have spent millions of dollars into our behavior and mental health care services. The city of Chicago has funded the Chicago Public Schools by a tune of $1 billion. That's what people want. They want good funded neighborhood schools. They want a transportation system that's safe and reliable. They want to be able to afford to live in this city. We're building the safest, most affordable big city in America. That's what the people are calling for, and that's what we're delivering.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
I'm wondering if you have any concerns that all of this pushback against Trump, knowing how he responds to that, if it might kind of be like poking the bear, if you will, and could make things worse and could actually provoke him to follow through with this talk about sending in the National Guard when yesterday he seemed to waffle. Could this make things worse, all this pushback?
Standing in unity is actually what's necessary when you're fighting against tyranny. I mean, could you imagine if as a descendant of slaves, if my ancestors would have had that same rationale. Let's not fight against the Confederacy. Let's just try to get along, and then maybe one day they'll give us our freedom. Nowhere in the history of America or the world where marginalized people have sat silent and idle and they've been able to actually achieve justice and liberation. The fact that you have a unified front in Chicago where we are rejecting the occupation by the military of our cities, that's actually fighting for our democracy. That's what's required in this moment. Leading in this moment takes a great deal of courage, but we stand on the shoulders of so many people that have come before us. We have seen these type of tyrannical acts before. One thing that we know for sure, when we fight back against tyranny, the people united will always prevail.
I have not seen reports of any protests in D.C. over the National Guard there. What if they were to come here? What kind of protests do you think that might spark here in Chicago as we stand here with labor groups that often tend to be involved in that?
Well, look, the good thing about Chicago is that the faith and the labor community are united in terms of how we work to secure access to public accommodations, right? We're all united around funding our education system, our transportation system, housing, healthcare, good paying jobs, and environmental justice. And so I know that the people of Chicago understand the constitutional privilege of being able to elevate your voices, to be able to protest in a peaceful way. That's what I'm calling for. That's what the city of Chicago is known for. And we're confident that as we continue to unite around our shared values, that we're going to prevail even in these most difficult times. Hi.
I know the message has been, don't come here, we don't want you here. If they do come here, how's the city planning for that, preparing for that? Have you spoken to, Karen Bass or D.C. Mayor on what to expect?
Well, first of all, I've been in constant communications with my superintendent of police. And, of course, I'm not going to reveal all of our tactics, but what I can say is that we have strategically placed a plan to allow for residents, one, to be educated and to know their rights, but to ensure that we're maintaining and keeping the peace. The ultimate goal is to make sure that the city of Chicago continues to be moving in the right direction as we drive violence down in the city of Chicago. Of course, I've spoken with Mayor Bass, Mayor Brandon Scott. I've spoken with Mayor Barbara Lee. Of course, I've spoken with Mayor Bowser. Look, we have a communication line in a chain that I believe is what is keeping us strong. The African American Mayors Association, the Democratic Mayors Caucus, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. My administration is in constant communication with mayors so that we are, one, very clear in our position that American cities should not be occupied by the military. That is first and foremost. It's illegal, it's unconstitutional, it's costly, and it's a disruption to what we know is sensible about our country.
In your conversations with Superintendent Snelling, would you want the, CPD to know where troops would be if they are here, National Guardsmen, to, not just set up a patrol without talking to CPD about it? Do you expect that to be the case?
Well, I mean, you would hope. Unfortunately, this whole operation is uncoordinated, uncalled for, and unsound. We always work better together when we're in communication with one another. We have collaborated with the federal government to get guns off the streets of Chicago. Just a few weeks ago, we seized over 150 guns that were trafficked in from Indiana and Mississippi. So we're always stronger and better off when that coordination takes place. But thus far, that has not been the commitment from the federal government. Is that everybody? Oh,
how you doing, Mayor Johnson?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. You talked, and the governor has talked, and Kwame Raoul talked yesterday about the partnerships that the city has had with federal partners, particularly on the law enforcement side. If indeed the president sends federal law enforcement resources into Chicago, how do you expect those partnerships to be affected going forward? And will the CPD be less willing to cooperate with the FBI and the DOJ?
Again, as I said, when we're talking about getting guns off the streets of Chicago, human trafficking, there are a number of issues that we already coordinate together on, right? And there's a reason why, we have a homicide reduction of 32% is because we're collaborating. That is the collective work that I have to continue to hone and bring people together around. What we have seen thus far is a lack of communication from the federal government. There's always a willingness to coordinate and to cooperate when we're talking about getting guns off the streets of Chicago, when we're talking about getting illegal drugs off the streets of Chicago. There are efforts that are constantly ongoing. We just have not been given the courtesy by the federal government in this regard with absolutely communicating with me or my superintendent of police.
Morning.
Good morning.
So something a little different. Certain candidates vying to fill Walter Burnett Jr.'s old 27th Ward seat allege that they were only given 7 days to apply for the position, while the younger Burnett was given nearly a month. So what checks and balances are in place for the process to ensure that there is a level playing field where a dynasty appointment is not a done deal?
The check and the balance is that the committee that we formed ensures that the expectations that the residents of the 27th Ward are met when we're going through this vetting process. Look, everyone had an equal opportunity to be able to apply for this vacancy, just as they have had in the past with other mayors. This process is no different. And once the committee reviews all of the candidates who actually applied, then I will ultimately make my decision based upon the feedback that I receive.
And the political savants in the flood-stricken parts of the city are asking what became of the, I think,
$32 million. Right, so the $432 million that I fought to secure, that the vast majority of those dollars are going to be used to repair the infrastructure that was poorly designed so that this doesn't continue to happen. And then we've assigned an additional, I believe, $15 million to go directly to the individuals whose homes were damaged. All right, thank you all very much.